So thank you all for joining on this Sunday morning. I hope this clears whatever doubts or concerns that you may have on pricing. So there are various things that I thought of when preparing this PPT. Uh, there are concerns that people have, so I tried to list the various kind of concerns that people may have. I've also looked at a kind of a starting point, because how do you start to even determine how to charge? And I have, while preparing this on pricing, I came to the conclusion that there were other related challenges that should also be addressed. So here's what we'll be covering today. uh, Concerns regarding pricing, the peculiarity of pricing for editing and writing, which is it's a little strange than pricing for anything else. It's a little different. Then there is a pricing challenge and other related challenges. Under the pricing challenge, we're looking at how to arrive at a price per hour, and factors for estimating that price, and some kind of hidden truths that we don't consider or we don't pay attention to when we're talking about pricing. So one of the things here is, let's look at the pricing concerns. What to charge? This is the main question that we see on WhatsApp. I have this particular kind of assignment. What should I charge? Or basically, people are asking for what are current rates for a particular kind of assignment. Besides that, there is how to charge. There's lack of clarity on how do you go about determining how to come to a figure. So there is, what is the current figure circulating for this particular kind of job. And the other question is, if it's not a particular kind of job, if it's other things, what do I consider when pricing? And the third thing, which I think we don't talk about enough, is pricing is linked to other concerns we have in terms of how much we earn, uh, and what we don't state. There's job satisfaction involved. We don't want to be at a price where we feel we're not getting a fair price for the effort that we are putting in. And there is recognition. If I ask for a particular price, it means that I am worth it, so I should be able to get that price. And there are also concerns on compromise. If the price is not agreed to, then do I take it for a lower price? Do I let it go? These are things that people are concerned with when we're talking about pricing. What to charge, how to charge, and the emotional aspect of it. Now, the strange thing about pricing is that, particularly for editing, no two jobs are alike. No two documents are alike. Other hidden factors that come in may not be the same. So that's one thing. You have to keep considering your price depending upon the job. If it's a light edit, you may have a standard rate that you go to. If you feel there's more work for you to do, then you want to charge a higher price. So it all depends on the document that you're editing. And I would include writing also in this, because I guess for writers also, these are the similar concerns that they have. The other thing is, editing and writing is a one-to-one transaction. The editor works on one document and he's working with one client, and he hands it over. So I may work on 2-3 assignments at a time, but basically I'm just working on one job, then I get paid for that one job, and then I can take on the next job. So I can't, I'm not dealing with, it's not a one-to-many relationships where I am teaching. Say if I'm teaching or conducting a training, I'm getting paid from many people for that one training. So that's the problem. One is that it is, every document is different, and secondly, it's a one-to-one relationship, one editor on one job. And this results in, different rates and pricing that you have to consider for every job. The other thing is there's only a fixed number of hours in a day. If I want to earn more, I have to work more, or I have to charge more for the job that I'm doing. So these are concerns. This is the strange part of uh, pricing for editing or writing. So now let's look at how to arrive at a price per hour. Before I do that, just look at all of these. Before I do that, I want to, I will stop sharing the screen for a second, and I want to give you a poll. Just give me a second. All right, so the poll has started, and you can start entering it. Can I have somebody not on mute so that you can tell me if you can see all the questions and scroll?
Yeah, I can see.
Can you scroll and answer?
Scroll as well.
All
Yeah,
right.
scroll as well.
All right. So please answer these questions. If anybody has any concerns on seeing the questions, please let me know.
Vishal Murugaraj here.
Yeah.
The fifth question that you plan to change, that was not changed here because the poll is already live. I cannot change it. So please let people know that they should not bother about answering question number 5.
Yeah, question number 5 you can ignore. It's a little incomplete because we had some concerns about it. So other than that, you can answer all the questions. Please ignore question number 5.
Sorry about it.
Yeah, but Murugaraj, it's not possible to click on the option.
Yeah.
It is not enabled. That's why I explained, because people would get confused and start wondering what is happening.
So how do I select
No, Vivek, are you talking about the rest of the questions?
No, just even for the first question, I'm not able to. I don't see any button on which to click.
Vivek, you and I are co-host, so we will.
Okay. So I can't take it. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to share the results. Can you all see the results now? Yeah. So,
Vishal Murugaraj here.
Yeah, Murugaraj.
And just we will take some screenshots of these results.
Sure.
As it will not get automatically shown. We can just go. You can go ahead, but don't close the window yet.
Okay. So for the first questions in terms of experience, there are 36% are freshers here, and 43%, that's 6 participants, more than 10 years of experience. The others seem an average of about 7%, that's just 1%. Murugaraj, I'm scrolling ahead, okay?
And you can go ahead.
Yeah.
Just don't close it yet, that's it.
Okay, so have you had any formal training in editing? We see that 64% have said no. 64%, that's 9 participants on the call today. What percentage of your client tell you the rate they pay you? That is, they don't quote a rate, and what percentage ask you? So I'm pleasantly surprised that most people have a mix of clients, some that they are told the rate to, and some that they have the privilege of quoting to. That's good. There's 50, so that's 43 or plus 36% who have who do quote. Oh, sorry, another 7%. That's good. How do you charge? Okay, so most say that they charge per word, which is what we were expecting. Generally, people in India do charge per word. What is the average rate that you charge or get paid? Oh, this is question 5, so it's null and void. how many clients agree to pay the price you quote? Most people say very few. Some are saying none. But still, here there is a reason to be optimistic. There's just 7% say that they don't they don't agree to the price they quote. How much do you earn per month? Okay, in the 25,000 bracket. Are you the only earning member? Most say no. How many hours of editing do you do in a day? So 5 hours is about 7%, and more than 5 hours is 21%.
Yeah.
And who do you work for, domestic or international clients, or both?
Yeah.
So people either work for domestic clients or they work for both domestic and international. That's interesting. Okay, I hope you can see my screen now. So let's start now. And the starting point is going to be, how do we determine a price per hour? Now, this is information I've taken from the book that I've quoted below. And it basically involves you figuring out what income you want based on what your expenses are. So what happens here is, your starting point is, it's instead of how much do I charge, it is how much do I need to earn. That's where we are starting from. So how much do you need to earn? We're looking at two ways of calculating this, but the first way is basically you making a list of all your expenses that you will incur during the year. You can look at it as a monthly figure and then take it as a 12-month figure, as an annual figure. But I think this is a very important starting point, not just for if you're an editor, but otherwise also. Make a list of everything your money goes into, and that includes your home, your business, as well as what you want to save. So every rupee of income that comes in should go into an Excel sheet like this. Your general will include things like, household or living expenses, rent, utilities, groceries. I hope people keep track of this, because this is very essential for whatever you're doing. What do you spend on healthcare, life insurance for you and your family, medical insurance, as well as any other thing that you can think of. This is just the templates shared by this particular author. But I think you can add or delete whatever you want. The next part of it is, what do you spend on your business? Your computer, maybe anything for repairs, your phone, what part of it is spent on work, any office supplies, any memberships that you've taken for as part of as being an editor, any editorial associations, any trainings. So let me start again. This is an Excel sheet which allows you to feed in information on what you spend on monthly as well as annually. And it's divided into things like general, which will be basically non-business, business expenses, as well as others. So I'll just go through the general first. Living or household expenses, rent, utilities is your electricity, water supply, that kind of thing. Groceries, if you have a car, what you spend on the car and your transportation, what you would spend on education for family members, healthcare for all of y'all in the family, life insurance, medical insurance. I'm going to scroll down. Then next is what you would spend on your business. The computer that you own, your phone and cell phone expenditure, office supplies, any memberships that you take for from editorial associations, any training that you do for yourself and your business, and any other expenses that you can think of. Taxes are whatever will go in by way of taxes. I'm guessing this is basically income tax or any other tax. And what you want to spend on even planning for vacations or entertainment on a monthly basis. How much you put in aside for savings or retirement, how much you would keep as emergency fund. This would be this is an interesting thing because if you remember the talk the other session that was had on fit, that included managing your finances and included having an emergency fund. I would generally not put miscellaneous because it would be good to have a label for it so that that money doesn't get absorbed anywhere else. Just because it's miscellaneous, you dive into it for anything. That's not a very great idea, but it's there in this template, so I put it here. Let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow, or if you have any questions. So what happens is when you do this exercise, you get a annual figure. Now in this case, what I have done is I have just assumed that the annual figure will come to about 6 lakhs. 6 lakhs is what you need to earn in a year to manage all those expenses and setting aside your money for your retirement or whatever else you want to. Now that 6 lakhs, we will look at also how to divide that 6 lakhs across to come to a per hour rate. So the days in the year are 365, and I subtract figures for weekends, 104. You may change that if you're working over the weekends too. Holidays I take as 10. Vacation days I take as 14, but 10 here because your Saturdays and Sundays are going in your weekend. And sick days is what you set aside for when you can't work. So that comes to about 130. So I subtract that 130 from my 365 and I get 235 days. Now, this 235 days is the number of days I'm working in a year. So what do I need to do? My 6 lakhs divided by my 235 days, which means my per day goal for the days on which I'm working is 2,553. I should earn 2,553 per day to get to my 6 lakh figure. Then I look at the billable hours per day. I'm taking it as 5 here. You can change it to whatever you want to. And if I take it as me working as 5 billable hours, the hours for which I charge, I may be working on other things, but the hours for which I'm getting paid, I divide 2,533 by 2,553, sorry, by 5, and I get 511 hours per billable hour. So I should earn, to get to 6 lakhs in a year, I should earn 511 rupees per hour. Now, this is only considering what I should earn. It's a whole different thing when I take into account what is my output per hour. Okay, so here I've put in another imaginary figure. You can put in whatever you want to. So if my output in words is I'm doing 1,000 words per hour and I have to earn 511, that means my rate per word to be charged is 50 rupees per word. Okay. So 50 rupees per word. I have 500 to earn in an hour. I'm doing about 1,000 words an hour, so I'm earning about 50 rupees per word.
50 rupees per word, but your figure is 0.051. Did you mean to make it 50?
I'm sorry, 50 paise per word. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That
makes some sense.
Yeah,
okay.
That makes more sense.
That's fine.
That's 50
fine.
paise.
Sorry.
Yeah, 50 paise per word. Now, 50 paise per word is what I should earn to get to 6 lakhs. Now, let's look at where we generally may be. If you take the average of a person earning if you earn at the rate of 60 rupees for a page of 250 words, then your per word rate is about 0.24. That is 24 paise per word is what you're earning if you get paid 60 paise per page of 250 words. So you can see that you have a gap here that you have to make up for. You are either going to work extra hours to get that 2,553 per day, or you're going to slowly have to increase your rate from 24 paise to 51 paise. So this gives you an idea of how to actually arrive at this figure. Again, like I say, this is not all. What I also want to do is look at the other way that you can do it. So one way here is we've looked at all our expenses and we have come to 6 lakhs. Now, if I don't want to calculate my expenses, if I just want to say, okay, this is how much I should earn, I'm coming up with any figure that comes in my head. If I say, okay, I want to earn 12 lakhs in a year, then obviously I'm not doing any math in terms of the calculation of how much I'm actually spending in a year, but I've just come to a figure, any figure that's in my brain. Here I've taken it as 12 lakhs, in which case then my hourly rate jumps up to $1,000. Wow. And accordingly, those other calculations also change in the same way. So I've given you two ways in which you can do it. One is called a bottom-up calculation, where I actually go into details of what I need to spend on, what my expenses are, and how much I need to save. And I come to one figure. Or I do a top-down calculation where I just estimate, or I just spitball and say, this is what I want to earn, and how much should I earn, get per hour if I want to earn 12 lakhs. Okay, so these are two different ways in which you can arrive at this figure. Now, I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to my PPT. Okay, so you can see my PPT again. Now, there is a concern with this price per hour. That is, it needs to be reconciled with the your output per hour, which is what we did. We took the output and we tried to calculate a rate. And even if we charge per hour, if we come to a rate per hour, we need a per, when we're quoting to the client, we quote per word. As we have seen, most people quote per word. And another thing is, this is a before the fact estimate. This is the point at which you are trying to get the client or trying to get the work. So you're making an estimate. You don't know when you actually get the document or look at it. It may be a lot more, require a lot more effort than what you quoted for. And there are other tangibles and intangibles that we'll go into that need to be accounted for when you're quoting this rate per word. What I'm going to do now is come to the second poll, which is a quicker one. And I've launched it. Please complete this poll. So here's the results of this poll. Most people get paid on per word assignments less than 50 paise per word. Some get paid between 50 and 1 rupee per word. On the per page assignments, most are earning less than or equal to 60 rupees per page. Then the next highest is between 76 and 100 rupees per page. And on per hour assignments, some charge 250. Less than 250 per hour, and the others are equally spread between 250 and 500, 500 and 750. Okay. Murugraj, I'm stopping this share. You've got the data, right? Murugraj, I'm stopping
Yes,
this
please.
share.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. So we can see that most of us are not getting up to that 50 per word, 50 paise per word. There are some who are getting paid per hour, but most are getting paid per, I'd say, per page or per word. Now, like I said, to arrive at this figure, you've got your figure that you need to earn. You've got what you are currently earning, and in all probability, you have to push that figure up per page or per word. Now, when you quote to a client, you also have to consider some other factors, which we'll look at in the next slide. This is what I call tangibles. These are things related to the document itself that you'll have to consider when you're trying to figure out what to charge. Some are basic that you know, the length of the document, how many words it is, what format is it in, is it easy or difficult to work on the content, will it take more time? My second point is more related to writers. Do you have, or it could apply to editors also, if you have to refer to material. If you have to refer to material which you're searching for on your own on the net versus refer to material that has been given to you by the client. Accordingly, you know, one will take less time, one will take more time. Then any unrelated tasks involved with the project. Is your client, do you have to travel to a location to work? Or is the client asking for a weekly call with you? That call with the client also should be included in your charge, because it's your time being taken up and your expertise being shared when you're talking to the client. So besides you're working on the document, if there are other things that you're doing like travel, expenses for food, any communication with the client on a regular basis, say you have to prepare a weekly report or you have to get into a conference call with him, these kind of things also need to be taken into account in your price because your time is involved. Next are revisions. How many revisions will you include in your quote, or will you include revisions at all? And how many of those revisions will you include? And the last one is the deadline. Is it something that you have to do urgently, or is it something for which you're given sufficient time? Obviously, if something is urgent, you should charge more because you're working at breakneck speed or whatever to deliver that. So these are factors related to the document that you need to take into account. There are other factors which I call intangibles, which are not related actually to the assignment, but which you should take into account. How busy are you? Do you have any other work at the time that this you're giving this quote? Do you have something planned for the future? If you're not, maybe you're willing to come down on your quote a little bit. If you are, and the client is asking for you, you may want to increase your quote. Secondly, the state of the economy, which is something very relevant for us now. Or which industry is the client from, how much he's willing to pay or can pay also depends on that. Are you willing to compromise or go back and forth on that a bit when you're quoting your rate? Third, is this a one-off? Is this one assignment you're getting from this client, or are you expecting regular work to come? If you're expecting regular work, you may be willing to come down a bit on your quote. If you're not expecting regular work and you know, or you decide that, you know, you don't want to work with this client again, then you may quote something slightly higher. Then what's your chemistry with the client? I know it's listed fourth here, but I think this is something really important because to a certain extent, editing is a collaborative job. If you're going to have difficulties or you're just not compatible with the client, then, you know, you may charge him a higher rate just because maybe you want to throw him off. You don't want to take that work. Or if you're working very well with a client and you see you want the relationship to develop further, you may charge a little less because you want to continue with this client. You want that client to come back to you. So the chemistry with the client, I think, is an important part of it. The next part is a benefit to your portfolio. Is this something really significant, this job, or you're working on a book or something which a lot of people will look at, and maybe you may or may not get a mention in the book or in the document. But if it's something which will have a lot of eyes and your work will be seen by a lot of people, you may want to add this to your portfolio and you may decide to go a little lower on the price. The second last one is the shelf life of the project. Is it a document that will be looked at for years to come? Is it a book that people will use as a reference document? Is it something that will be very valuable to people over the years? So based on that also, you may decide on the shelf life of the project. It increases your visibility if it's something that is going to be looked at by a lot of people. And you may want to be willing to compromise on the price if that is something, because you're getting another benefit from it. The last one is the necessity to subcontract. Are there parts of the job that you can't do yourself? You'll have to get somebody else to do. So that price also has to be factored into your quote. So these are some of the things when you are deciding on a road. We know, let me go back and take you through this step by step. We've decided a rate per hour that you want to work at. Then you've looked at what your output is and how that output will probably affect your rate. And the third part of it is these tangibles or intangibles, things directly related to the document that you're going to edit or write, and things that are intangible, but things you need to consider when quoting a price. All right. So we've looked at these factors and let's move ahead now. So as for the main question with regard to pricing, the actual part of how you go about doing it, the mechanics of it is what we have already discussed so far. Now we're going to go into another territory, which I think is just as important, is that there are things about pricing which we may not consider or we may not have even thought of. And this part, I think, is something that you need to, which affects you as a editor, more than just coming up with a figure. So from this particular author's book, I'm not sure how he pronounces his last name, Jake Poinier, I think is what it is. He says, this is a quote from his book, "You should be aware that the market will test your entrepreneurial skills far more than it will ever value your ability to mash a keyboard." And the translation of this, my translation is that being an editor is not enough. You need to be a sales and marketing person too. I think particularly for freelancers, we do not have this skill. It doesn't come naturally, the skill of business acumen, how to quote, how to deal with a client, the relationship while you are quoting, those kind of things. It's something we've not been trained on. You can be trained as an editor, but this is a whole other kind of training that you would probably have to consider or do more to consult people who quote more regularly. That you need skills in how to sell, how to look for clients, and how to price long term, not only just on this particular thing. You need to look at it 6 months, 1 year ahead, in terms of increasing your number of clients and in coming up with a rate also. So this is one thing, that being an editor is not enough. The second quote I liked from his book was this: you need to monetize your brain. It takes the sum of everything that's brought you to this point in your career and getting somebody to pay you for it. When you edit a document, you're not just editing that document, you've got years of experience, however many that is, and whatever life experience there is that goes into editing the document. That also plays a part in the price you quote. And my translation of this is, you should be charging for your expertise, what you know, what you've gathered over the years, and not just for the edit that you're doing. So though we may come to figures and we decide a figure and we look at all that logically, every time you quote, every time you present yourself, every time your document speaks for you, this is what should come through, that you're an expert in what you do, and you need to, that expertise needs to be valued. Because if the author, whoever the client is, has come to you, they are not just paying you for that one job, they are paying you for what you bring with you to put into that one job. So this, it's a state of mind, I'd say, but it's something that you need to look at. I put this as a 5-minute discussion, but looking at time, I think what I want you to do is to share maybe on chat, rather than have a discussion which may prolong, because we can go on talking about rates for years. On chat, if you could just type out your answers to all or any of these questions. When you quote to a client, what is the reaction of the client to your rates? What are the reasons the client may list for not agreeing with your price? And when you quote, are you giving an explanation for your quote? And what does that explanation include? So if you could share that in chat, that'd be great. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute.
Can you please show the second question?
Yeah, just a second. Sorry, I've just gone ahead. Give me a second.
I just shared the screenshot in the WhatsApp group for webinars and the social group. So we can answer over there in the chat.
Sharing it here also. I'm not able to see your questions while I see the chat while I'm sharing my screen. So I'm just going to stop it for a second. All right. So some agree, most don't. Some say that they don't give reasons for their charges. Some have never asked for a reason. Most will say, yeah, that the reaction is high, that the figure is high. Yeah, and they get better rates with others. The reasons are not included. It's not within their budget. Okay. So this is where we come to, you can see that in most cases the client would not agree, or they would say that, it's not as per our budget, or, we don't share what the rate includes, what our rate includes. So this is what I'm coming to now in terms of other related challenges. So I'm going to start with the story, which I think most of you know, because if you go on the net, you'll see various, versions of this story. And the story is that there was a guy whose car, he had some car trouble, and he went to a mechanic and told him what the problem was. The mechanic took 5 or 10 minutes, fixed the problem, and the car was fine. And the person who had brought the car to the mechanic asked him how much he had to pay. And the mechanic said $1,000. So this guy got taken aback and he said, you've spent 5 or 10 minutes on the car, and how can you charge me $1,000? I want to see your itemized bill. So the mechanic says, fine, here's the itemized bill. And the itemized bill says that he had to tighten a screw, and he charged $1 for that. But knowing which screw to tighten, he charged $999 for that. So this comes down to two things. It's basically the unrelated issues that I'm going to talk about, or the other related issues, is one, skill. What is the level of skill that you have that you can identify a problem when you look at a document, and then know how to sort it out. So we are looking at skill, and we are also looking at demonstration of value. I think this is a big gap or a hurdle that is we need to overcome. I myself particularly, I would say that this is something very difficult to communicate to a client, that this is the value I have added to the document you gave me, and this is the state of the document now. So this gap, this being able to identify or to show the value that you've added, I think if you are able to do that, it will help us to stand by the price that we quote, to a certain extent, of course. It depends upon a number of things in terms of the market and a whole lot of other stuff. But one is, where are you in terms of your skill level? And second is, how are you showing that the value to the client? The mechanic knew which screw he had to tighten, and the mechanic got the car working. So he demonstrated skill and he demonstrated value. The car was working once he worked on it. It may not be a very great analogy for editing, but I think to a certain extent it works. The client should be able to look at the document and say that, yes, I can see where the value has been added. There are other concerns which I'll get to in more detail in terms of skill and demonstration of value. There's one more thing I wanted to add in terms of a pricing challenge, and is this your position in the value chain? Who are you getting the work from? We'll go into detail later on as we proceed, but I think these are three related challenges to price: skill, demonstration of value, and your position in the value chain. So let's look at skill. These are the basic things that you would consider. I put them as features or challenges because I just wanted to bunch them together. But training, mentoring, experience, how many years of experience you have, and I've also included general knowledge. What I mean by general knowledge is not just in editing. I don't know, my experience is that it matters more than in any other profession. But in editing, it's not just what you know in terms of how to edit and your style guides. It's also about what you know about the world around you. I could give you an example. It may not be perfect, but it's something like this. If you are editing an article that is talking about the students' movement against climate change, fighting climate change, and the article covers a number of things, I would be surprised if the article doesn't mention Greta Thunberg. It would be something that you would want to bring in because she's a major factor. She's very important, and she's the face of students leading uh, the climate change movement. So that's what I mean by just general knowledge. It's not enough just to be trained and to use your experience. You have to have a worldwide view of what you do. The other part of it is, let's look at some solutions for training, for skill getting. One is getting trained formally from an expert. Give me a second, my screen is. Having a mentor, preferably on a job. This is something that if you're a freelance editor and you've just begun as a freelance editor, you lose out on the mentoring part of it. So if you're lucky enough to find a client who is willing to mentor you, even though you're a freelance resource, you may be willing to come down on your price because you're getting a certain level of training from this particular client. It may be limited in terms of the work that the client gives to you. It may not be where you the field that you want or the type of documents that you want, but it's something to consider because it's very difficult to learn to be an editor without the guidance of someone. Formal training is one thing, but on-the-job training it's invaluable. The other thing is, even with the clients that you work for, I would say seek feedback, ask for feedback. Sometimes they are so busy that they don't consider or they won't think of giving you the feedback. But even the feedback, whether it's good or bad, it's good to have that. And that will help you with your skill. Definitely feedback from the client will help you in your relationship with any client as well as with your skill. Fourth is reading for pleasure. I don't know how many editors actually read subjects different from what they're editing, and just reading for the sake of reading, because if you're reading a book that's written well, and I'll tell you what Dr. Venkat said in our trainings, is that whatever you edit, you should read literature because literature shows you different ways in which sentences may be written. So that's a training that you also get, and it becomes instinctive over a period of time if you're reading for pleasure. And if you're a writer, if you're an editor, you have to be writing sentences on your own. Whatever it is, whether it's an email to a client or a report for the client, you have to go through that process of constructing sentences. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to add to your training. Coming to demonstrating value, these are the challenges that you may face. If you have a client, and I'm talking about the person that you're dealing with to get the assignment or to give you feedback on the assignment. If the client may be in publishing, but he or she themselves is not an editor or writer, it adds to your challenge to explain what you have done, or for the person to even go through the document and see where you have added value. So this is, I think, a major concern, that if you're working for a company or an editor or a client who's not an editor themselves, demonstrating value becomes that much harder. And the next thing is a client who's not in publishing. Here I mean, if you're working with, say, the communication cell of a company that is manufacturing, solar equipment, or an MNC, the person you're dealing with, if they are not like an expert in communication, that will also add to your problems, to be able to convince that person that what you have written or what you have edited is adding value. Then if you're working for a writer who hasn't worked with an editor before, so somebody has written a book and they just want you to edit it, they will what happened, Kanis?
Hey, that is the real challenge. That the author wants you to edit and doesn't want you to edit.
Yeah, so that becomes a challenge also. So demonstrating value is basically, the task is more yours than hoping that the person on the other side, understands what you're saying or understands what you have done. So if you're lucky, if you have somebody who looks at the document and is an editor themselves, or a writer who appreciates editors and sees the value that you have added. Again, I'm going back to this in terms of the stage we are in. We are in the stage of putting a quote forward. So how do you go about talking to these kind of people who do not understand the value that you as an editor put in? How do you go about trying to convince them? One, I would say, is ask intelligent questions. Don't just accept a rate and say, okay, I'll get back to you. Ask questions to get the client thinking about what you are thinking of. And for that, I would go back to the checklist we looked at in terms of tangibles and intangibles. Do you have any reference documents I need to look at? Is there, how much time do I have? What is the deadline? Those kind of things. Even intangibles like, do you need a continuous follow-up? Are we supposed to talk to each other regularly? Say it's a 6-month job. Do you want to talk every 2 weeks, every 6 weeks? Something like that. This will show the client that you're thinking about what you're going to do, as well as highlight to them things that are involved in what you do. It's not just, here, take the document and I'll see you in a month's time. There are things to be considered. So for ask intelligent questions, I'd say look at the things we discussed under tangibles and intangibles. Secondly, state what you have done. So if you asked to do a particular kind of book, say, okay, I've worked on this, something similar before, and you can ask them to refer to it or send them something so that they can look at what you've done. The next thing is explain reasons for recommended changes. And this, I'm talking about the process before you even start editing. You're talking about the stage at which you are giving a quote. Somebody comes to you and says, I want a developmental edit done or a structural edit done, as well as a copy edit and proofreading. So give me a quote for everything. So you can get back and say, look, a structural editing is something that you would need when you have completed the entire document. whereas the development editing may happen while you're still writing the document. So I can't give you a quote covering everything right up to proofreading, because there are going to be a lot of gaps and back and forth in between. So you could say, I'm going to quote you separately on each of these things. Or you can give, the first part of it to somebody else, and I'll just take on the copy editing. So this helps you in terms of even demonstrating value to a certain extent. Demonstrating value also happens on the job. Once you get an assignment, try and find a way in which you can go the extra mile. So if you're at a fresher, or you don't have much experience, and you've just been told to edit the document, during the course of your edit, if you come across certain things that you think need changing, then maybe you can mention that. Like, I'll give you an example. If I've worked on documents where I'm copy editing, and my job is just to look at sentence by sentence and make the change. But a lot of time in a paragraph, I will find that what should have been the first sentence of the paragraph comes as the last sentence. So these are organizational changes which interrupt the flow of the document. So though you may not be permitted to make that kind of change in terms of moving sentences around, it may work in your favor if you point that out, that, I think this sentence should go in first. The worst that could happen is somebody will say, no, it doesn't, and, stick to what you want to do, and you know what to do going forward. But if you have a feel for the client and you have an opportunity to show what else you can do, then take that opportunity. Maybe not on this particular job, maybe on something else, it'll add value. So these are the things you can consider when you're demonstrating value. The last thing in related challenges is your position in the value chain. And this, I mean that if your client is a subcontractor, that means they've been handed down the work from somebody, by somebody else, and they are, client one has got the job from the original client, and client two has got the job from client one. So naturally, if you're working for a subcontractor, everybody is taking their cut along the way, and you're not going to get a fair rate. And you do not have, your power for negotiation drops drastically. So what you need to do is move up that chain. See that, the closer you work to the original client, the better your position becomes in terms of quoting. Now, this is something I'm sure most of you have experienced on a job. Somebody takes it, they come to you, they ask you to do something. You think long and hard about taking something like that, because there's time and effort involved, and the original client doesn't know who you are. You may or may not benefit from something like this. So we're coming towards the end of our session, and we've looked at the actual, brass tacks of coming up with a figure, as well as the challenges, other challenges related to the price you quote. What I've done here is, overall, I've looked at challenges and I've put a few things together. I know you may laugh when I say choose your client, but what I've shared with you is also something that will probably help you choose your client. If somebody is difficult, if the work, you have impossible deadlines, it may be worth your while to say no. I leave this to each and every one of you to decide, because you know what your position is in terms of income, and what you need to earn in a particular month, and what your other responsibilities are. But consider this when you are going with a new client. I would also bring this up with people who are getting the quote, or you have to work for a rate of like 65 rupees for a page of 300 words. a page should not be 300 words. Internationally, a page is 250 words. If somebody is saying that they're paying you for 300 or 400 words, your alarm bell should go up, and you should, either go with it and say, I'm not going to work for this person again, or you should maybe say, look, I take up clients that pay me for 250 words a page. Or you take it up and say that, I'm still looking around and this is not going to be a permanent client of mine. So the more you choose your client, the more easier things become for you. I had a blog that I wrote in January of this year based on these three things. I created a list. My blog says, it's a declaration, but I created a list of what I was going to look at going forward. And on rates, it was one thing, if I have a client that's paying me 250, that's paying me 60 rupees for a page of 250 words, the next client, I'm not going to take on somebody who's going to pay me 300 for 300 words. I'm going to stick to finding people who will pay me for 250 words. And then keep moving that 60 up, higher and higher. So these are the things that you may want to consider. A client that mentors me may get preference, even if it's a lower rate, than a client that, doesn't give me any feedback. So these are the things that I wrote in my blog, or ways in which you can demonstrate value. So you prepare a list for yourself and you say that when I'm quoting or when I'm working, I'm going to run through this checklist and see whether it satisfies me before I take on the client or before I quote. The next thing is find your niche. You may be a generalist now, but the more you become an expert and portray yourself as an expert in one particular area of editing, the more you will be sought out, So if you're an expert on medical editing, somebody will think of you and get in touch with you. Or if you're doing fiction, somebody will think of you and get back to you, rather than you doing everything. So gradually try and funnel this because it helps you sharpen your skill in one particular area or 2 or 3 particular areas. And you move up the ladder or you get more prominence in terms of being an expert in one particular area, and it helps you negotiate your price. Let your expertise shine, talk on trainings, participate in discussions, have a newsletter or blog, and share your ideas. It becomes difficult when you start a blog or a newsletter to think of things to write about. But you need to share your ideas, what you're thinking of other than your job or things related to your job, and what you share in terms of value to other people. Here is a site that I visited that will help you this particular thing, or there's learning in this particular video, something like that. So let your expertise shine. The more you gain visibility, the better it becomes for you. Make it easy for people to find you. Your LinkedIn profile is not a dormant space. You have to keep on updating it. Even if you just add a line that says, I see many people do this, currently working on, XYZ kind of document. So it helps you when somebody is doing a search. And another thing I find, which I think everybody needs to work on, is your LinkedIn profile should give as much detail as possible on the assignments that you've worked on. Don't just put one line and say, okay, because it's too tedious for you to go into detail. Don't just say, I worked on a nonfiction book. Try and get into some details in terms of what you've done, so that a nonfiction editor, somebody else who's looking, a nonfiction writer, somebody else who's looking for a nonfiction editor may say, okay, these are the skills I need for this particular job, and they may contact you on LinkedIn. If your job has gone well, make sure to get a testimonial or a reference from that person and add it to LinkedIn. because that's the only way somebody else will. Lots of this works on referrals. So if you have somebody who says something good about you, please make sure you update your LinkedIn profile regularly so that people can find you. Diversify your income streams. It will help you get through a period where you may not have clients paying you the rate that you want. If you're earning something more from another stream, you may be in a position to take a dream job, a dream assignment as an editor, which will not pay you much. But you can compensate for it because you have money coming in through other sources. So try and diversify your income streams. Think like a problem solver is also related to diversifying your income streams. We know that there are people sharing information on macros, on styling and that kind of thing. So maybe you prepare a particular kind of style sheet which will drop down lists, which becomes so easy for an editor to work on. Maybe you charge for that particular kind of style list, a style guide, sorry, a style sheet, or those. So try and think as to how you are solving problems of other editors or of writers or of any other category that you want to work with. That may become another income stream. And work to create a pipeline of continuous assignments. This is why I say, and I have used the benchmark of 5 hours of editing in a day, because you need to spend the other 3 hours, at least one of the other 3 hours, in terms of finding work. You may have work for the current month and the next month, but you need to start, contacting people, finding work that may come up 3 months down the line or 4 months down the line, or maybe you'll get a client that will give you regular work for a year. So instead of spending 8 hours editing, if it's possible, I know that it may not be possible for everyone. If it's possible, spend 1 hour a day, the 6th hour, trying to set up a pipeline of continuous assignments. Here is a list of something that you can, the way that you can converse when talking about the rates. You ask about what you want to get done and get details of when the client starts listing what they actually want on a job, it becomes easier for you to quote because the client has said it. So, and that goes into your price. And when you say my price is X, you include these details that the client has mentioned. So get the details. Very often you may find a client who may tell you something verbally, but may not want to put it in writing. But you put it in writing as soon as you've done with a call, saying, this is what we discussed on the call, and put those details down. And this is why I say that an editor should get used to writing, because your reports, your communication with the client, you have to get used to writing and putting all these things down, because it works in your favor. If somebody is asking you to quote, I would say you counter that question with what's your budget. Okay, it's just a way of getting them to think and getting you to think. If they haven't thought of a budget, they will say, no, I don't have a budget, or they will tell you what the budget is. And then you can, it's another step in the decision making as to whether you want to take this work on or not. Some other statements that you can make is to ask for an extract. This I would say you should do on every assignment. You will do a sample edit of 1,000 words. Please do not do edits of more than 1,000 words, because it's a waste of your time unless it's a paid edit or paid sample. This will help you gauge how difficult that document is. So, and it will help you quote. So be willing to do a paid edit, or even an unpaid one if it works in your favor. When you quote, you have to say my fee is so and so per word or so and so per project, and includes and put the whole list down of whatever it includes, big or small, whatever it is. So this also becomes a way to demonstrate value. Then, if you ask your client what the budget is, and you are saying, say you give a quote and you say my fee is rupees so and so, and it includes XYZ, and the client comes back and says my budget is so much and it cannot pay for all these things. So then you can counter and say, okay, so instead of XYZ, for your budget I can do X, or I can do X and Y. You know, so that's a way of working around and maybe negotiating, and that's a way of sticking to your stand also, and not taking on more than you can do. This is something that I have tried, not with an editing assignment, but you know, if you're in the mood or you're feeling a little adventurous, if you have a short assignment which doesn't involve so much time, and you're willing to take the risk of the client paying you after you finish the assignment, depends on how well you know the person. You can say that I'll complete the assignment, and after you see the work, you pay me what you think is appropriate. This is a way to, you know, it's like taking a chance. He may quote the figure that you have in mind. They may quote the figure you have in mind. They may even quote higher. I tried this not on editing, but when I was frustrated with some other job that I was doing, and I found that people were not paying me enough, I tried this once, and the person paid me a little more than on something small that doesn't involve a lot of time and effort, and you know that the client is somebody who may be able to see value, or you're just taking a chance that the output you give will really show a marked difference from the document you started editing. You may say that, you know, pay me after you see this, and you may, if the person quotes a rate more than what you would have asked for, then you take that, you know, you can probably start taking that as your baseline rate. It's just a, you know, a chance or something you can try, but be very careful, because when you're feeling adventurous. Finally, I want to talk about you as a seller. We know, we always talk about buyer beware, that when you buy something, you have to be careful about what you pay for it. But you as a seller need to take care of this. That if your sin is that you have not put anything in writing, you are starting out in a very precarious position. So you have to put things down. Even a casual conversation, please put it down if it involves something that's going to affect your output or it's going to affect your rate. Secondly is discussions on WhatsApp. I'm a person who believes that WhatsApp is not a good place in which to discuss rates, primarily because there's no record of what you have discussed. Yeah, you'll probably go back and say, oh, I keep my WhatsApp messages, and then you'll spend hours scrolling, trying to find out what you discussed with the client earlier. Please move your WhatsApp discussions to email, because this is a safeguard yourself. Don't have discussions on rates and all on WhatsApp. Or you make immediately, you take that WhatsApp message and put it in an email down, just to safeguard yourself. All discussions must be recorded in writing and communicated. That's what I'm saying. Don't just put it in writing and keep it to yourself. You put it in writing and send it to the client saying that this is what we discussed. It'll involve effort on your part, but it may safeguard you. Sign a formal contract with the client if the client is willing. If the client is not willing, then you still have your emails. But you need to have something formal, and if email is as good as it gets, then put it down on email. Payment terms must have a written confirmation. So particularly payment terms, you should get an okay from the client returned on email saying, yes, I'm okay with this rate and we are good to go. Your start of work must be conditional on receiving an advance. This is particularly if you have a long project. Make sure that you have milestones, and particularly make sure that the start of work is conditional. I receive an advance and then I start work. You may have received the document, but no, I've received the advance and that's when I start work. You can put it as delicately as you like. Subsequent payments also conditional on receipt of payment. So you get to a milestone, you say, I'm supposed to send this the document to you at this stage. Can you please make the next installment of payment, and so that I can send the document to you. So these are things I say as a seller, as a person, who's working on various pricing challenges and payment challenges. This is something that you have to keep in mind. I'll end with a quote from this lady, Casey Brown. You'll find her TED Talk on online. It's called Know Your Worth and Then Ask for It. She says, no one will pay you what you're worth. They will pay you what they think you are worth, and you control their thinking. So this, I think, goes back to that demonstration of value. You have to put in a lot of effort to figure out how to communicate that value to the client. And my final quote is something which triggered my declaration on rates and on clients and on demonstrating value. This came up in a WhatsApp conversation with Kaniz, who's an ICF member and who's present on this call. And this is what she said when we were discussing rates in January. Let 2020 be the year of self-actualization, of self-worth. Rates are a good place to start. So thank you, Kaniz, for triggering that and other thoughts with me. I'm going to stop my share now and see if there's anything that people want to ask or share.
So Michelle, one thing that they want from you is the Excel sheet, which they say that it's very useful. And
yes, I will share that Excel sheet, and I will also share the author's site, which allows you to, he has a template there which you can just fill in, but that is, what should I say, those are annual figures that he wants you to, does the calculation on his site. I would still say it's very useful, and I have done it myself, to split this up into monthly figures, because there may be certain months in which there's a surge of expenditure that you incur personally. So you may want to keep that in mind. I will share that document definitely, that template.
And the link for your blog, Inderpreet wanted that from you.
Okay. So maybe that I'll share. What do you recommend in the WhatsApp group? Can I do it, or how do you want me to do that today?
Can you do it in the chat box right now, like if you have it handy?
Yeah, it will involve. Just give me a second.
But I think it was a very detailed presentation, and you answered whatever questions people normally have. And
yeah, I'm glad you found that. I also want to tell you that this author's book, The Science, Art and Voodoo of Pricing, I can share you the link on Amazon to his book. But more of what he has done, or what is in that book, is in another discussion, is in another presentation I did for the Mumbai meetings a year ago. In fact, in August of last year. And that's a more detailed discussion. You may find more value there, which I didn't bring on to this session, because I didn't want to repeat too much from that session.
so that session is actually available on the ICF YouTube channel. So
yeah.
Members can go there and check it out. And there was another discussion on pricing that we had at YMCA Delhi. So I have shared the link for that also in the chat group. So that video also is something that members would like to check out because it discussed the survey that we had carried out. So today's sample size, I would say, was very small, but for that, at least I think maybe we had at 100 members participate in the survey. So the findings will be more meaningful to them.
Yeah, I've just shared the blog link. It's with Substack. I've just shared that in the chat.
Thank you, Michelle.
No problem. I hope you find value. That blog contains, besides pricing is what I started the year with. But as we got into COVID and a whole lot of other stuff, I try and put out a blog every month. So you may find other value there too.
I'm sure I'll read through it, and even the session, it has been very informative, and it gives me food for thought also. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's exactly the point here, that you may not be able to use all of it, but some of it you can at least start using and then build on it as you go on. I myself have just put this together. I'm not saying that I've used it and I've perfected it myself, but I think it will help you if you just start with something small and just keep adding on from whatever we've discussed.
I have a question.
Yes.
First of all, a lot of thanks for getting into these particular points, because relatively I am a fresher, and I wanted to ask and go back to that slide when you said that when you can project your what is it? Yeah, you were talking about the shelf life of the projects. So being editors, we are not most of the time acknowledged or credited, right, in the books or whatever the project is. So how to decide about, or how to project that we worked in such and such assignment, or we work for such and such project. Because when you are a writer or you are a translator, right, I've translated a book and I got my credit, I got a name on that book. But like for editing, you don't get the credit. So how to project that?
See, that's when I spoke of shelf life, I was talking about the life of the book. So whether you get credit or not for it, if the book is current, something that's around even 3 or 4 years from now, and you shared it, say in your LinkedIn space or anywhere else, saying that I was the editor on this particular book, even if you don't have the credit for it in the book itself, I'm sure you can, unless there are some concerns with the publication that you can't do that. That's one way that you say that you edited that particular book. The other way is to bring it up in conversations during the course of, if you can't mention it, bring up during the course of any discussions you have with the client.
And what's the general practice, right? Because as I said, I'm relatively new. What's the general practice? Do the writers or the publishers, they acknowledge somewhere in the acknowledgement or any page whatsoever in the book, the name of the editor somewhere?
I don't think that's very easy unless you have a editor.
Personal kind of relationship.
Yeah, with the editor, or there's an understanding before you take it on. Am I right, Vivek? You're on mute, Vivek.
Anupam, can you answer this because you have worked in a publishing house?
Yeah, so if you guys allow me, I have a lot of things to say. So first I will take up
Please, that's why I asked.
Dr. Ruchika's question here. Most publishers will not give credit to a freelance editor. There is no way that's happening. Most publishers will also not give credit to the in-house editor. Forget about freelance. Okay. The third thing is, most authors, if you ask them and if you have a personal connection with them, may credit you in their acknowledgements. Okay. So if you can get that in a conversation, or if you have satisfied them a lot with your work, it would be a good idea to pitch for it. Ask them, can you please add a line? Okay. And if you can get them to send you a free copy, that would be the best, so that you can show it to your clients. If they don't, and if they have credited you in their acknowledgements, then please buy the copy and keep it. Okay. But other than that, there is no way to get credit for it. If
Because
you work
foreign authors, they do. I have read a lot of books where foreign authors have given such kind of credit to their editors.
in their acknowledgements only,
Yeah, they're in their acknowledgements.
not in the copyright page. Sometimes
No, no,
credits
no.
are given on the copyright page for illustrations, for artwork, for cover design that publishers give, but not to freelance copywriters. That is very rare. Okay. So that's why I'm saying you have to go try and get the author to give you credit in the acknowledgements page. Okay. The only other foolproof, or rather a good way of projecting that is, or rather, if you do not have anything to show to the clients that, you know, I've done this, I've done that, is to talk very, very confidently. At all points, you should definitely know more than your clients. There is no way you should not take up a client who knows more than you. You should always know more than your client about your work, number one. Number two, project absolute confidence. And I will use the word cocksure here. You have to look absolutely confident about what you're talking about and what is your work. Okay. If you talk confidently, the chances are there that they will buy your charges, your fees. Okay. Third thing, what Michelle has already covered, is ask a lot of questions. If you go to, I'll take the example of a car mechanic. If you go to the car mechanic, before he screws that screw, tightens that screw for you, he will say, ki ye hua hai, wo hua hai, this is the problem, then this has to be done, this will affect that, this will affect that. And by the time he gets to tightening the screw, you're overwhelmed and you will pay whatever he is asking for. Okay. It may be a marketing trick, but why not use that marketing trick? Because you're knowing which I to dot and which T to cross is what makes your skill so valuable. Okay. And your clients who know less than you do not know how to do that. So ask a lot of questions, give a lot of scenarios, tell them the sequence of events, tell them the cause and effect relationships between, okay, do you want American English or British English? Why are you choosing American English? Why not British English? I can recommend, what is your target audience? I can recommend this. I can recommend that. Have you talked to your publishers? Are they looking for this? Have your publishers offered a style guide? What is their current style guide? Are there any exceptions to it? Ask as many questions as you can. There is no harm in overwhelming your clients with your questions. They will realize that you know your shit. I'm sorry to use that word, but they should know that you know what you're talking about. So that is very, very important. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So be absolutely confident, even if you don't feel confident. Fake it till you make it. I'm sorry to use that phrase. Okay. And
Continue, Anupam.
Somebody wanted to say something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a few more points. Can I continue?
Yes.
So there was this point about 250 words. Please realize that Indian publishers till date have not accepted 250 words as the standard. But if you are a member of ICF, please show some royalty and insist on 250 words. If somebody says, no, I will pay 300, I'll pay you as per 300 words, you say, sorry, I'm not going to work with you. Let them work with copy editors who are of lower quality and from other places, not from ICF. Please insist on 250 words, because your insistence, especially of freshers, will help the seniors. It's very practical thing.
Yeah, it will help us too. Of course,
Yes,
you have to reach up to a standard. Otherwise, anybody is doing anything. Like people are doing it for 10 paisa per word or 20 paisa per word. I'm just really frustrated.
Please insist on that, because you will realize.
Another trick they use, can I speak? Another trick is they're trying to pay you for, they do single spacing. So instead of 250 words, you sometimes land up with 400 words. And then they
you please insist on word.
That's another
please
trick. They want them to do double spacing.
Unless it's a PDF and unless it's a PDF which is normally spaced out properly, and that is for proofreading. And if it is not very typeset, you can go per page. Otherwise, please insist.
A lot of publishers will say, try to pay you per page and then squeeze as many words as possible into that one page.
Yes.
So you land up getting nothing.
Please don't fall for that. it's always a good idea to look at what you're getting into before you get into, and that's what Michelle has already covered, right? Somebody has asked, is 250 words per page a standard set by ICF? No, it's a standard that is internationally followed. It is, we have not, ICF has not set it up, okay?
Very few Indian publishers have also accepted it yet.
I have not come across anybody who has accepted it yet, but if we as a group on it, people will start.
University Press does. Oxford University Press accepts 250 words.
Well, as long as I was there, we were not accepting it.
I worked with.
I have come across people who
allowed 250 words.
So the other point is Michelle has covered is calculating your monthly income. This is a very, very important exercise. Calculate both your monthly income and your annual targeted income. Remember 2-3 things. First of all, if you're getting into it, always look at the possibility that you will be an entrepreneur. As an editor or as a writer, you're going to be an entrepreneur for the rest of your life. Think about what are your goals for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Because if you are in a job, you will know that you will get 10% or 9% or 15% increment every year. What will you get here? You don't know that. So you will always have to have a plan for how you will go about increase your income by at least inflation rate, right? You have to match the inflation rate. Every year you have to increase your income, not necessarily your charges, but charges is a part of that. You may have to increase your charges every year, but maybe you have to graduate to higher value tasks. Maybe you will have to graduate to doing something that will give you a career growth. I don't know, maybe you work with a group of editors, maybe start an editorial firm of your own, become a broader entrepreneur, but always think about what you're planning to earn. Because I mean, don't get into it thinking that okay, it's project mein itna mil jaye to chalega, you know, not that. Always think about what your monthly income should be and what your annual income should be, what your life insurance should be, what your medical insurance should be, what your investment should be, how much you want to save on your taxes, how much you will put in your PF, in FD, everything should come within it. Similarly, calculate your expenditure, including travel, vacations, movies, snacks, going out with friends, everything has to be calculated so that you have a clear idea of how much you should charge. The other thing I would say is that it's always better to err on the side of charging more or quoting more than on quoting less. See, if you quote high, so for instance, if I feel that most editors, most writers have a huge imposter syndrome. We always think that we are worth less than what we actually are. Okay, realize this. Please realize this about yourself also, whether you have this problem or not, because it's a big problem. We may sometimes think, okay, this work is probably, if I get $100 for this job, I'll be really happy. If you have thought in your mind that you'll be really happy if you get $100 for this job, go ahead and ask for $200. Are you getting my point? Don't ask for 100, ask for 200, because you are probably already undervaluing yourself. Okay, so think about if you have to quote something on the fly and you do not have an extensive rate list or extensive Excel sheet, always quote the double of what you feel will make you happy, because and then maybe you can negotiate a bit, but not below what will make you happy, obviously. But always quote double of what you feel is good. I'm just giving a thumb rule, not an exact formula here. Okay. Well, these are the 3 points that I wanted to cover. Thank you.
Thank you, Anupam.
Anupam, you being in the publishing industry, what has been the standard rate basically that you as publishers have been paying out, and for different kind of work?
If you're talking about US publishers, then I do not know their rates at the moment, but I can tell you the rates that, so for instance, I can tell you for a fact, and this I've studied, the rates that Indian publishers pay to
Right.
copy editors in India has not changed in the past 12 years, 12 or 13 years. It has not changed. For 300 words, some publishers, medical publishers, don't pay more than 45 rupees per page for 250, for 300 words. Okay. So the rates have not changed the past 12 years. If you're talking about US based publishers, the US based publishers are usually, there are two models that they use. Okay. The first model is that they send their business to packagers in India, like SPI and Newgen, who then hire editors to work for their content. Okay. But in that, what US publishers also do, for instance, is what I know from Oxford University Press and from Sage Publications, is that they have their own pool of certified or tested editors who are native English speakers based out of UK and US or Australia, New Zealand, such countries. They are in their system, and these packagers contact them or organize or manage the project with these people rather than non-native speakers of English in say India or Pakistan, Bangladesh. So that is my experience. As far as rates are concerned, I can guarantee you they would be at least 100 or 200 times of what they pay in India.
Right.
Vivek, should we attempt to create a kind of document that collects all this information on rates, whatever it is? I don't know whether it'll be of value, but when somebody just sends a WhatsApp message, at least there's something to refer to. Is it of value?
I don't think, Michelle, that will serve any purpose. The point is, unless every freelancer does the exercise that you have mentioned, it's meaningless. And what they will do, they will just start referring to that list and quoting according to that.
I agree with Vivek here, because you see, I'll tell you a very simple thing. We live in different cities and we live in different areas of the same city. Simply the house rent is also different. So how can everybody say, okay, this is the base rate that ICF members are charging, so let me charge that. It is a very, very necessary exercise what Michelle has suggested. Everybody needs to do their monthly income calculation. If you don't do that, please don't say that you're working.
But there should be something, beyond which one should not go. Like below that.
There is nothing like that.
Allowed.
What is the meaning of beyond which we should not go? Do you think
below,
you're selling below? You mean to say below?
Below. Sorry, yeah, beyond was not.
You should never go below.
How the American Association of Editors have a kind of a standardized rate. If ICF can kind of come to some kind of a rate where we say, okay, as per ICF rate, I mean, this is what we are looking at. So if we could arrive at some kind of standardization.
There is no, there are no standardized rates being recommended by any association. They just carried out a survey. Maybe 5% or 10% of their members participated in that, and whatever list is there, it's based on that survey, which was probably carried out 10 years back.
Yeah, they have an hourly rate basically. What I'm trying to say, if we could work out some kind of standardization.
Let me tell you something.
Then as editors, we kind of say, okay, listen, we don't go below this. Because
let me tell you, see, the problem, lower benchmarking is absolutely your comfort level. If you put a benchmark, a lower benchmark, then there are a chance that you may not get that work. So if I put a lower benchmark saying that, okay, the benchmark of ICF is 100 rupees for 250 words. So there are chances you will go to your clients, especially freshers, will go to your clients and say, okay, the benchmark for that ICF is put is $100. So I will not charge less than that. A lot of clients will not be willing to pay for that. And you have to see that how much you can charge also is dependent on your number of years of experience, your skill level, your ability to demonstrate previous accomplishments. So there are a lot of factors. So if there is a benchmark, if there is a lower benchmark, the other problem is there are some people who already charge above the benchmark. Okay, so clients will come to those people and say, your benchmarks published on your website is this. How are you charging more than that? then I will have to say that, oh, well, I am more experienced or I have more skill. And I will have to get into the exercise of proving my skill to those clients, which is absolutely unnecessary. Why should I do so much hard work? Let me tell you, the lowest is always take your lowest as your monthly income. If somebody is telling you, I'm going to pay you less than that, then you say, sorry, that is not my benchmark. Let the lower benchmark be your monthly income. Don't depend on somebody else. See, the other problem is if you put a benchmark, a lower benchmark, there may be an upper benchmark also. But why should there be an upper benchmark? There may be a lot of freelancers who can and will be able to extract more than that from a lot of clients. Okay.
Yeah, understand.
So there is no reason why we should go around thinking that, well, what I'm offering is an Alto, when what you may be offering is a Ferrari. Okay. So again, it's a question of having that imposter syndrome. The, what Michelle has given in this exercise is the best way. I have been a freelance. I actually started freelancing as a copywriter only recently. That was August of last year. So it has been a very sharp learning experience that you should always think of yourself as extremely valuable. Only then you will get clients to pay you things of more value. But of course, unless you actually are good, people are not going to pay you well. So coming back to the lower benchmark thing, you should always go with what Michelle has said. That calculation is the most important thing.
Yeah, got the point. Thank you.
All right. So if we are done for today, then I'll say thank you very much to everyone for being here and participating. It's been very informative, especially the discussion we've had in the end. And I agree that, that's a good point to take that lowest rate per word as your lowest benchmark. It is a realization. Some of us may not be even meeting that. So there is a struggle and a whole lot of wrangling to be done. But start, and the more we are as a group, the better it'll get. The 250 thing is really something that you should start. Just take it for granted that the client doesn't know, and tell them it's 250 words. Just say it, even if they know and they say they don't know it or they really don't know it. And use the words international standard.
Michelle, a better way might also be to charge per word, so that this problem with how you define a page doesn't come into the equation.
Yeah, but I'm also looking at Vivek. See, if you have the privilege or the ability to charge per word, then it really helps. But if you're in a situation where somebody is quoting to you per page and there are 700 words in that page, at least you should be able to say, but the international standard is 250 words.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. And I think I'm surprised there are a lot of people who don't know this, who don't know about the 250 word per page standard. All right. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
Just one thing. Sorry. Hi. No, I was just keen to hear what does Vivek have to say about all this, because he also has a lot of experience, including like what Anupam said about medical, and now he's been freelancing for some time. Vivek, if you could share something here. You also work with international.
I think you will have to ask a specific question, like what you want to answer.
So when the discussion was around what is the minimum or how do international clients pay, and Anupam was talking about what he knows of like in medical editing, and you are into medical editing, right? And you've been working with also a lot of international clients. So it is that there's a large amount of difference between there and here, and they do work with native English speakers.
Well, I don't work with authors, I work with publishers. And when you work with publishers, normally what I would say is that you are in a price acceptance phase. The publisher will actually decide the price based on the budget.
Right.
Now it's up.
Sorry,
So it's
when
up
you
to
say you work
so
with publishers, you mean you'd work with like on journals, or is it
Yes.
that journals? Okay.
Yeah. So they will give you a quote, and then it's up to you to accept that or not accept that based on your situation and various other factors. But primary consideration should never be the price. All those factors that Michelle has also mentioned, you need to consider that also. There was a question in the poll: are you the primary breadwinner? So you need to take that into consideration. Do you have supplementary means of income or passive means of income? What stage in your professional life are you in? Are you a fresher? Sometimes saying no just at the beginning closes a lot of doors that could open if you just enter into that compartment. It's like when you are at a railway station, you don't have a reservation. So your first priority has to be to get into the train. Once you get into the train, then somehow you adjust with someone on the seat, and later on you get your preferred window seat. So that's the chain that one has to follow. And maybe 2-3 more things I want to say. We ran a survey, but we think we need to have it, maybe link it more scientifically, like whether people with more years of experience or whether people with formal training, are they earning more? Are they are the ones who are working for international clients? I think that differentiation somehow we need to find out a method to figure out, because once that becomes clear, then maybe the importance of training or mentoring or feedback, that will also be felt, and that is something that people will invest in. Because like there can be different analogies. You go to a market, and you have a medical problem. There is a doctor who has an MBBS listed on his signboard, and there is another doctor in the nearby shop who doesn't have any degree, or who has just written RMP. RMP is registered medical practitioner. So who will you choose? I don't think without giving it a thought, you will go to the MBBS doctor. So it's not that clients don't know what they are looking for. Sometimes they don't actually get those resources, and they have to make do with
But
lesser.
Vivek, wouldn't, if you're trying for an international client, I mean, wouldn't they want an international formal training rather than an Indian training? Nobody would really recognize an Indian editor training. They want an international standard. Just as when they asking, when they kind of put out work, a lot of them who specify native English speaker. They think Indians don't know English. That kind of a style still exists in the international client's mind. They still think that we speak, local language.
So you need to filter those clients out. Okay, they want a native speaker. Let them work with a native speaker. There are enough clients who don't want a native speaker, who want a good editor. And an American might call training happening in India as an Indian training. So similarly, I can call something happening in another country as native to that place. Who defines what's international?
Yeah, because getting rid of this bias is not always possible. If you're putting up, for instance, you're putting up your qualifications and you kind of put up an Indian editorial training that you've had, it's not really given as much weightage vis-a-vis an international training, formal training in editing.
Cora, I would say like all these are marketing or sales nameplates that you put. As soon as the patient enters the doctor's cabin and the doctor does the examination, the patient will know how good is the doctor. So as soon as the client sends you a sample and you do your work on that sample, if he is knowledgeable, if he can judge, he will be able to determine your value and give you a rate.
So may I add to that, please?
Yeah, sure.
So Cora, as Vivek just said, these are all marketing and sales activities. Okay. Has Cora's video frozen? Can you hear me, Cora? I think our internet has disconnected. Should I continue?
Yes, Anupam, yes.
So these are marketing and sales activities, and if there seems to be a strong reason or strong benefit in going ahead and getting an international training done, then one should go ahead and get it done based on your budgets. There is no harm in that. Why should anyone say no to a training? But there is a marketing model called awareness, interest, desire, and action. You have to get your customer through these 4 stages. The first stage is awareness. If you feel that there is a bias against you because you're a non-native speaker of English, you have to reduce the resistance of potential clients from picking you. So what you have to do is you write a lot, you publish a lot on your LinkedIn profile or on your blog. Let them know how well you write. Okay, that's first. I write a lot on my LinkedIn profile, and the reason for it is one reason is that I love to write. The other is that I need others to see what is my command over the matter that I want to fix. Right. The second thing is that if you want them to know that, see, world is a very gray area. People like to hear people speak in their own accent, right? So there are chances that people will in the West will feel that you cannot really speak English. How will you? Indians probably don't know how to speak English, so they probably can't even edit in English. What do they know? What do they know about English? So what you can also do is, apart from writing a lot, you can also put up videos of yourself explaining things about your work, about various subjects, anything. It could be something about, say, serial commas. It could be something about capitalization. Let them see you speak also. And I can guarantee you nothing raises confidence level or trust level like watching a video. So these are 2 things that I can tell you that you can probably do immediately.
Anupam, what were the things you said? Awareness, interest?
Desire and action.
Thank you.
I can share the link for it later.
Ruchika, you are on mute.
I was saying that it's not only people, think maybe something smaller or lower degree for Indians only. It's always that Britishers and Americans, they keep on fighting. The Britishers and Americans and Canadians and Australians, they keep fighting among themselves. So it's about, it's worldwide. It's not only with the Indians. So if we are good, we are good. If we can do, we can do. That's it. So there's no shortcut or no thumb rule or nothing like that. I mean, you have to market yourself.
Okay, so thanks everyone. Thanks, Michelle, for a very informative session and for providing all the links. And see you next Sunday again at 11 a.m. We will have a session by Dr. Venkat on the principal rules of writing and their interconnections.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Michelle. It was a great session. Thank you very much.
Enjoy your Sunday.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay,
Michelle, Vivek, Anupam. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.